Story time. How, why I married an addict. I was divorced from my first marriage for about 3 years when I met someone who I thought was sweet, nice, and had their life together. They had a job that was a good job. They had a home, they had a car, they had no children, and we started dating. We had so much fun. We'd go out, we'd party, we had good times. We'd have cookouts, and all the families was invited. My kids really liked him. And my two older boys really liked him because they were born way before my third child was born. So we dated for about 4 years and we got married. But before we got married, he had told me he dabbled in some drugs. And I was like, oh, okay. Because me being naive, I didn't know anything about addictions or drug use or nothing like that. I thought if you were an addict, you would never admit you're an addict. That's why you were an addict, because you just do stuff and never, mention that you were an addict or whatever. But anyway, so I knew that he did certain things, before we got married. But he always went to work. He always had money. He always, had good things. So just before we got married, he purchased, he had a house built. And he let me pick out all the flooring, the cabinets, the colors of this and that. So, it was a house I thought that was being built for us. But he told me before we got married he wanted to live in it maybe, a few months before we moved in. Me and my kids. So anyway, eventually we did move in. We got married. Me and the kids moved in. Then I told him, we should have a child because he didn't have any kids. And he was like, I don't know if I'd be a good father. I said, well, you're a good father to my two boys, so why wouldn't you be a good father to your own child? So I ended up getting pregnant, having a baby, 10 pounds, 1 ounce, big old boy. And he was a great father. We switched, because I was working at the post office at the time. He was working at the hospital. So he switched his schedule to midnights. And of course I was working days at the post office. So when I get off from the post office, he'd go to sleep and I'd watch the baby. And, that's just how it worked for us. We did it that way, and it was awesome. And he would videotape the baby while I was at work so I could see what he was doing and everything. And I mean, it was a wonderful, wonderful life for the first 2-3 years. Then I noticed he always every weekend he was going out. Before, of course, I would go out with him, but now that I have a baby, I'm not gonna just leave my baby to go out with him and hang out, and I don't think he really wanted me to anyway. So I just noticed that he would stay out all night. Then it got to the point where he wouldn't even go to work. He would call me and tell me, something, and I'd have to call his job and let him know he got stranded somewhere or whatever. And so at some point we opened a restaurant together. And we were running the restaurant really good and everything. And I think that's when the addiction really kicked in. And he really started using heavily. And because he wasn't working at the hospital, so he just felt a little more freedom to get into that type of lifestyle. So there were times he didn't come home for the whole weekend. So at one point, he did do a 30-day rehab type situation where he weaned himself off for 30 days. But soon as that 30 days was up, he took off. It was a blizzard storm I'll never forget, and he left. I'm like, why are you leaving? I gotta go somewhere. I gotta go somewhere. And I'm like, that monkey's on his back. He's gotta go. So, and we were right back where we started. You know, my mom loved him and everything. So we continued down that path, you know, and it was just getting to the place where I was constantly, why are you leaving? Where are you going? He would never be able to stay at home. And, you know, he still was taking care of the baby, or, well, he's growing up now. But he would take him fishing, and we'd go and walk in the park or walk in the woods. He was still being a very active father with my baby. You know, he was a coach for the baseball team, so he stayed active in our child's life. And like I say, my two older boys were crazy about him. You know, he was silly, he was fun. But then there were times when I guess he wasn't using or whatever, and he was just, bleh. And then I'm like, God, I wish he'd use something so he'd get happy again. You know, I didn't know, I didn't understand it. So then it got to the point where he was so addicted, he would go to work on a Friday and not come home till maybe Monday or Tuesday. All weekend gone. So finally, it got to the point where I just couldn't do it anymore. By then, I think my son was about maybe 4, 5, somewhere around there. He was about 4 or 5. And he had started losing a lot of weight and everything, and, you know, things just were not adding up anymore. Me trying to cover up with his job, and then finally it got to the point where, you know, I'm not sure if he got fired. I think he got fired before we divorced, or right after we divorced, because I had somebody give him the papers that I wanted a divorce, and so I remember he had looked at the papers, and so when I come in, I told him, I said, I want a divorce. He was like, okay, I'll pay for it. It's like, dang. So, you know, we ended up getting a divorce, and he ended up losing his job, and I couldn't afford the house that we had at the time, so I moved back to where I had been renting my place out at, so I still had my home. At least I had enough sense to keep my rental property, which was my home at the time. And so me and my son, we moved back there, and he would come to get my son at times, but I would tell him, don't tell him you're coming to get him and not get him. And then one time he wanted to take him on a boat or something. I said, no, you might fall asleep, and he's not going to be on a boat with you by himself. And I told his parents what was going on and everything. And so, like I say, he ended up losing that job, and he started doing some other type of work through a delivery service or something from a hospital. But eventually he ended up moving to another state to get a job because they had blacklisted him in all the hospitals in Michigan pretty much. So he went to another state and started working there. So that was, you know, I hated that because he wasn't there for our son anymore. And I mean, he talked to my son probably every day, and things like that. And we stayed friends for a long time. But you know, it was a heartbreaking thing because I did love him, and he was a good person. He is a good person. He tried to be a good father, from a distance, but how can you be a good father when you're so far away? And at some point, my son did go and live with him his last year in high school and graduated from the state that he lived in. But as soon as he graduated, he was ready to come back to Michigan, you know. And I said, "You sure?" I said, "You don't want to stay down there with your dad?" He's like, "No, I want to come back to Michigan." So he did, and that's my youngest son, and I'm so glad he did, because me and him have really, really developed a great adult relationship between mother and son, and we're like the best of friends. And he's there if I need him. I'm there for him, and he's the only child I have that I've really gotten a chance to be around as an adult, because my other two boys, they live in different states. But when they became adults, they kind of just went away. They just kind of left and went to another state or whatever. And my oldest son, we kind of got to hang out a lot. When he was here, he would take me to concerts and things like that. But, you know, my middle son, he was off doing his own thing. So we were close, but we never got to really hang out like we should have or wanted to. But we were very tight. But anyway, me and my second ex, he remarried. He's married now, and we don't talk anymore. After his mom died and I saw some behaviors that I didn't like, I stopped wanting to talk to him anymore, because I couldn't bear to see the things he was doing, you know. And my son, he knows some of it. I don't know if he'll watch this video to figure out what all of it was about, but he never wanted me to really tell him, and I never told him. So he knows his dad did, you know, drugs or whatever, but you know, he never wanted to talk about it, so I never talked to him about it. But he knows, and you know, he still respects his father, and that's what happened. I just told the whole story. So that was just something I realized I had never spoke about my second marriage. I haven't really spoke about the third one either, but that might be for another day. But the second one, I had just been holding off talking about it because of my son, but now he don't really care. He knows what's going on. So that's how I married an addict. You know, hopefully I've lived and learned that when you see somebody taking certain drugs, or drugs period, and they're not prescription drugs, you should just leave them alone, because it's not worth it. It's not worth it, because you never know what you're going to get. Because I was so used to him being in a certain state of mind that when he was, I guess, sober or whatever, he just didn't seem like the same person. But anyway, that's what happened. So that's how I married an addict. Alright, you guys, look for my heart in this video. It's not the one that I blow. You guys keep confusing the kissy blow with the big heart that I say what color it is. So you guys, I'm going to leave this video now with you. If you have any questions or comments, you know what to do. Leave them in the comment box. And if you're new to the channel, go ahead and subscribe. Make sure if you've been here before, you like the video, you share the video, you comment on the video, and you guys know that I love you. Bye. Mwah.